Welcome back to Drink Wine Make Quilts. I'm Luann and I'm so happy to have you here. Today I'm going to be demonstrating how to make what we call the modern quilt square. And this is what it looks like. That's what this one looks like. The great thing about these squares is everyone looks different depending on what fabric you use, what designs you cut out, and what you do. What I really have enjoyed about this square is that it's really all about creativity and what you're feeling in the moment, and based on how things are cut and what you're wanting to do and what you're looking at. I mean, it's all about creativity in the moment, and none of it is about precision and cut this amount and this length. And you just kind of find a groove that's going to work for you. I first found this square a couple of months ago. I'm making a memory quilt for my sister using a bunch of her old t-shirts that she's collected over the years. And I didn't want to make one of those traditional memory quilts where you just cut the t-shirt and you kind of sew all the t-shirts together. Even though those are great, I wanted to make my sister something really special. She'd been saving these for about 37 years, and a lot of the t-shirts actually brought back memories for me of our childhood and just different stages in our lives. And so I wanted to make it really special. And so that's when I fell upon this square design, and it's been really fun doing. I've made a lot of mistakes. I've learned what not to do, and I've learned best practices. And so I decided to take this time to show you the same thing. And I'm so excited to do it because it's such a fun square. As always with every video, let me tell you about what wine I'm drinking today. So I have chosen a Kendall Jackson Pinot Gris, and it's their Vinters Reserve. The reason I chose Kendall Jackson is a few reasons. First of all, I work for a restaurant company and we're all over the nation, and we have partnered with Kendall Jackson in the past. And so I know a lot about their product. I know that it's good product. I know that it's popular, and I know that it's not very high cost, which is what I'm always looking for when it comes to a wine. Anything below $10 is like a pure winner for me. This one's a little bit over $10, but not that much more, and enough to make it worth it. I'm not normally a huge Pinot Gris fan, but I feel like Kendall Jackson does a really good job. It's still going to be a little bit dry, a little bit tart, but light, and hits your tongue so nicely and goes down nice and smooth. Also, a lot of Kendall Jacksons are twist off, which is always nice. You don't have to worry about your wine opener or anything. You twist it off and go. All right, so you guys ready to get started? And hopefully you're so excited to get started on your modern square. Okay, let's get started. So I'm going to show you kind of everything that we need in order to do this square and give you some direction of what's not a great idea and just mistakes that I've made along the way that I don't really want you to have to go through to make. Everything that we'll see, you'll be seeing here on the table. I will be going off and sewing and pressing. As you do this, just make sure to have your iron hot and ready to go, and your machine on and ready to sew. Okay, so each square you want to be the same size. And so the best thing to do is to cut a piece of canvas. Honestly, it can be any fabric that you want. I just happen to have an extra piece of canvas that I have cut out. And so you just want a piece cut out that's the exact size that you want for each square, and so that you can use this as a guide. And this is the only thing that you'll really need to measure. And so I'm making a quilt with 25 squares that are this size. And so I have cut out this piece, and it's now my guide. Now, the center of each square needs a 5-sided shape. And that shape can be whatever size and whatever way that you want. So this is one of the centers of one of my squares, and this is another. And as you can see, they're two totally different pieces, and it just doesn't matter. And you'll also see, and I don't know how well you can tell, but this isn't an exact, we have here a house shape, but it isn't even exact. This side's a little bit longer than this side. This side's a little bit shorter than this side. And just because it just doesn't need to be exact. You just need to cut some 5-sided pieces of fabric ready to go. Now let me show you what not to cut. You want to try to avoid pieces in this shape with these triangle cut out on the side. This is a mistake I made very early on, and they make it pretty much impossible for you to be able to do. You can do it, it's just very complicated and very hard, and I personally don't think worth the headache, especially with how much fun this square is. But there are lots of shapes that you can do with this. Even if you do this house type shape over and over and over again, you can do it in different sizes and different lengths and in different variations, but there's lots you can do. What's been really fun about the quilt that I'm working on is that each t-shirt had kind of something different that I wanted to feature on it. And so it was really easy for me to create those middle shapes. You can make this middle shape as large or as small as you want, just depending on what you're looking for. And so if we have a larger piece, your outsides are going to be a little bit different. This is the main piece that I started with here, compared to a smaller piece. As you can see, we have a lot more outside fabric. And so it's really just what you're looking for. This will also work with a 4-sided. As you can see, this one is 4-sided. 5-sided is just what's recommended. I just have so many that I was doing, and it's such a large scale that I kind of did it differently. And so 5-sided is what is recommended, but a 4-sided would work. All right, so what else do you need? You need your iron hot, your machine on and ready to go. You need to cut your center piece, whatever piece it is, and then have your supplementary fabric. Each square, I am trying to do different fabric, and all based off of my inspirational fabric. And so I have chosen with each square to have 3 additional fabrics with the main center. However, you can choose as many fabrics as you want. Literally, there is 0 limit to this square. It's all 100% your creativity and how far you want to push it and how far you're willing to go. Additionally, you'll need your quilt mat, your rotary cutter, and your ruler thingy. All right, you guys ready to go? Let's get sewing. Okay, so when you are doing this, you kind of need to think ahead, but just again, remember thinking about that it's all about creativity and in the moment and what you're feeling and how you're feeling and what you're feeling. But the way that you really just need to look ahead is you need to think, where do I want this center square to be? Because it doesn't necessarily have to be in the center. So like for this one that I did for this square, I chose, this is the cutout is over here. This is from the t-shirt. Don't look at the wrinkle that was there. But anyways, I decided to have it more towards the bottom instead of in the middle. And so again, this just shows like what creativity that you can have while working on this square, which is what makes it so fun. For this and for this demonstration, I'm going to go ahead and keep this square in the middle just because it's the easiest. So you can start on any side that you want. And you can start with any fabric that you want. And so for now, since I'm planning on having this in the middle and I have lots of room to grow, I'm going to go ahead and set aside my template. And let's get started. Since this is the fabric that I have the least amount of, and it's kind of a small square, I'm going to go ahead and get started with this fabric. And I'm just going to start on the bottom, I guess. And so you're always going to sew right sides together. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take the edge of my fabric, I'm going to connect it to this, and I'm just gonna sew along the bottom here, just connecting these two together. And so you want to make sure you keep a 1/4 inch seam, meaning you keep your fabric right against the foot as you sew. And then once you get it sewn together, you want to press it. So I'm going to go ahead and go do that now, and I'll be back. I'm back. So as you can see, we got these two sewn together. I have this nice and pressed out and looks really good. So now we have all this extra fabric that we need to cut off. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to line this up with the center piece or the piece that we're working on. We're always going to be working off of the center piece, and you'll see what we mean as we grow. And so I need to line it up here. So I'm just going to fold up my fabric. So it makes it easier to cut. Put it right against the line here. I guess that's 14 that we're going against. Line it up. And cut. So as you can see now, we're lined up on both sides because we started sewing on this side and we cut here. And so now we need to decide how thick you want this piece. Since my square is quite a big square, I am making all of my pieces 2 inches for the strips, but you can make them any size that you want, and they don't even necessarily all have to be uniform. And so you can make one 1 inch, and then the next one that you do, you could do 2 inch, and the next one that you do could be a 1/2 inch. It doesn't really matter. It's 100% up to you how big or how small you want to make it. And just depending on your square size is going to decide how big you want it. So like I said, I've been doing 2 inches. So that's where I'm going to keep it. And what I did for that, is I just lined up right where the seams meet here on the 12, and then I cut out the 14, and so making it 2 inches. All right, so that's side 1. And so now we need to take a different fabric, and I'm just going to go ahead and grab this one. Oh, good, I have a smaller piece here. That makes it a little bit easier to deal with. It's a little bit smaller. And I guess I'm going to go ahead and do this side. And so I'm going to sew all the way from the top of where, right before the triangle starts, if I were considering this a rectangle. And I'm going to go all the way down to here. Again, sewing right sides together, using a 1/4 inch seam and then pressing. I'll be back. Okay. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to cut along this line because it's a little bit easier before I show you what we're going to be doing with this line. So let's see, we need to cut here. This is kind of an awkward piece. In general. I'm going to put this along. I guess my magical number today is 14. I don't know if you guys are ever like that or have ever noticed that when you're quilting, but I just have some numbers that I just end up hovering around. I think, wow, I need to change that up. I don't know why I feel that way, but I do. Okay, so now we're all nice and lined up on the bottom. And so now we have to make this cut. And so again, we're trying to just keep it in line with what we're doing. So we're actually going to cut along this slant here. So I'm going to put this here up. You'll never guess what number on. 14. Oh, it's actually 15. Look at that. I'm going to cut along here. And so now we have this nice big slant. And again, I'm keeping to a 2 inch rule. So 13, 15, and cutting. So let's walk you through that again. So we had a big long piece. We had to line it up with this bottom one to continue to keep true to the center square. We then had to cut down and so that this stayed flush. And then I am sticking to a 2-inch strip. So I cut a 2-inch strip. Could I have left all of this here? Absolutely. And then I could have sewed along here and it could have been a big long thing here, but that's not what I'm wanting to do with mine, but that's what you could have done with yours. It honestly doesn't matter. So I'm going to continue moving around in a circle like this. Sometimes I move in a circle. Sometimes I go bottom and top. Sometimes I go left and right. It kind of just depends on what I'm feeling in the moment. And I feel like going in a circle. So, okay, this piece is like a huge piece. So I'm going to cut off some so I'm not having to deal with such a large piece because that can get cumbersome. Okay. So now I'm going to do right here. And so that was not the straightest edge that I just cut. Look at that. That's a little bit straighter edge, not terribly. So now I'm gonna go here and I'm just gonna sew from this point all the way down to this point using a 1/4-inch seam and then pressing my seams. I'll be back. And back. So the first thing we need to do is we need to get this in line with the square that we already have. So we need to cut along here because we have this extra here. So we need to get rid of that. So I'm gonna go on the 15. See, I'm not 14 all the time. I think it's just because it's like in the middle of where I'm filming. And straighten that along there. And then again, I'm keeping to a 2-inch seam. And so I'm going to cut off. However, again, you could leave this like this. If that's what you want to do, then that's what you should do. Leave it like this. And then you can sew along here and you can sew along here. It's whatever you want to do. But since I'm taking to that 2-inch seam, I'm putting the seam here on my 12, right where it lines up, and I'm going to cut at the 14. Magical number. Maybe I should go play those numbers of the lottery. And also, it looks like this, I sewed a little bit, like I didn't match this up totally directly, so I'm just going to make sure that this is all lined up here. I do have some interfacing on the back because these are t-shirts, and so I'm probably just going to cut off a little bit of that interfacing too that's sticking out. Voila. So now we continue in a circle. So I'm going to go back to this fabric, and now I'm going to do this side. Again, it's the same exact thing where we're just going to line it up against here, right sides together, sewing from this point to this point. All right, you guessed it. The first thing we have to do is line it up. And again, I'm going to cut off some of this interfacing that's sticking out. And again, we could leave it like this if we wanted to, but I am going with my 2-inch seams, or my 2-inch strips. And so I'm just going to line it up right on that 13 and cut at the 11. And as you can see, we are getting there. Isn't this cool? So now we're going to do this side. And now, so here on this side, we only sewed from here to here because that's all that was there. But now we're going to be sewing here to here. So it's going to be a longer strip of this. Things you want to try to avoid are, so let's say I were to use this and I were to sew here like this. See how this cuts down? You want to try to avoid that. So I'm actually going to go ahead and cut this off because what can happen is, let's say you want to keep to that 2-inch or 1-inch or whatever inch strip and you are unable to because it's slanted. Another thing I learned for you guys, don't worry. Okay, so now that's all clean and ready to go. Right sides together, 1/4-inch seam, press, and I'll be back. All right, first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna line it up here, and then we're gonna cut in this diagonal here. So now everything is in line with our center square. We're building everything off of our center square, but I wanna keep it at a 2-inch strip. But again, I don't have to. This is just what I'm choosing. And I'm going to cut here at the 10. And voila. So I am going to, at this point, pull out my guide. And I'm going to place this on my guide to kind of see where I'm at. Now I figured I'd have some more to go because I started with a pretty small one. But you could be looking at this and you'd be saying, you know, it actually would be kind of cool if this was down here and I just built. Actually, that's what I might do. I like the idea of having this big chevron pattern going into little squares up here in the corner. I like that idea. So I think that's what I'm going to do. And that's what you can kind of look at and decide. And so now I have to think, okay, if I'm going to be building a bunch of chevrons going up, I think I do kind of want to continue in this pattern where I'm going around, but no more on the bottom. And so going here, then here, then here, then here, then here. And so I'm just going to continue to build that way until we get to the top. And each and every time I will be putting right sides together, so in a 1/4 inch seam, pressing the seam open every time and cutting around to match the shape of the center square, and then cutting that 2-inch seam. Okay, we're on our last cuts. As you can see, I was using my template all along the way to help me measure and catch little problems that I was having and make sure that we were all lined up. Because sometimes it can get away from you, even if you are measuring carefully and making sure you're cutting exactly right. Just be careful when you're using your template to not cut your template. Last cut here. So I made some changes of everything I was going to do along the way. I had a plan, but then I liked one thing better, then another thing better, then another thing better. But in the end, look at, I end up with this really cool square that I have yet to have on my quilt. I have this square that's different. I have this square that's different. This one actually goes this way. This square, that's different. This is actually one of my favorites. And they're all different because I went in a different direction each and every time. So you can just take your creativity and push it to its absolute limits and end up with some super amazing squares. Even here, as you can see, I said I was sticking to a 2-inch, but I didn't stick to a 2-inch here. I have a bunch of different sizes, and I have a bunch of different sizes on this one and on this one, and it's just whatever you want to do with your creativity, which is what I love the most about these squares. If you have any questions, be sure to drop them in the comments below. Also make sure to like and subscribe, and so that you can see us again next time here on Drink Wine, Make Quilts.